we're back on Monday Night Fitba on Radio Saltire. Thank you for staying tuned. Right, it's time to discuss Hearts. So initially we're going to discuss the news, and then that will lead on to just a wee general roundup of things and talk about where we're going over the summer. So the first bit of news, again, is non-football related, directly at least. It's the stadium redevelopment chat. So there was a story with Anne Budge this morning, over the weekend slightly, that it reignited the debate that has gone on amongst rival football fans for years and years of the ground share side of things. The chat essentially is that Anne Budge believes that the most financially viable option for Hearts, as and when we redevelop the main stand, which she moots could kick off as soon as next summer, the most financially viable route for her would be for us to simply ground share at Easter Road for however long the maintenance or the upgrade takes. Now, I know that this is a subject that normally gets the fans going a wee bit, so I want to gauge opinion in this room and see what the thoughts are generally, and see if we can roughly guess what the thoughts would be on the other side of the city, so that we can see if we were right next week. So Sean, what would your reaction be to a short to mid-term ground share at Easter Road?
Well, I wouldn't be too massively against it, purely because someone needs to sell it out at some point. Sorry, had to get that in there. No, if needs must, then needs must. We've all been to Easter Road, I would think. It's not a bad stadium by any means. I would, to be honest, travelling wise and stuff, it's much better being there and being able to get an actual atmosphere, as opposed to at Murrayfield, where it's all, we've all been there before as well. The atmosphere, you try and get singing going, but it just doesn't travel. It seems to travel up the way and out the roof. You can't make it that cauldron that you want it to be. Easter Road, legitimately, we could do something there. Whether it would be feasible and whether or not it would actually be in the realms of possibility is yet to be seen. I can't really see it, to be honest, okay. But I wouldn't be massively against it. Right,
I'm playing devil's advocate in this situation. So you used the phrase there, needs must. Mm-hmm. If I'm a Hibs supporter, then I have no needs. There are no needs that must. Mm-hmm. We need not help our biggest rivals, Heart and Midlothian. How would you sell that to Hibs? What is the positive from a Hibs perspective? Can you see that they would actually entertain that? Is it a monetary thing? What's the setup there from their perspective?
Well, firstly, off the bat, financially, it can be a nice wee earner for them. The only thing they would need to worry about off the bat, obviously there's stupid things like seats getting torn out and things like that, but when that's your home for the year, I'm sure you treat it a lot nicer than you would if you're going there once or twice a season. With that, the main problem it would need to be for both teams is what ground staff are they getting? Are they getting double time? Because that's twice the games that are getting played on that pitch, and we know the Scottish weather isn't conducive to very good pitches at times. That's, to be honest, the main thing. Obviously, it's you've got the villains in your lair half the time, but you're not there. It shouldn't really matter. It is a money spinner for your club. I think the one thing that would play into the hands of it happening is Anne Budge and Liam Dempster seem to be in the good books together. It showed with the Hearts and Hibs and Motherwell also, although Leanne Dempster's got a hand in there also, approaching the SFA regarding the playoffs. So there's definitely a precedent for it there. Anne Budge has been in the press recently talking about how well it's worked for the old firm previously, so why should we not be a united front and try and work together for the better of Edinburgh? So I think there's obviously going to be a knee-jerk reaction with Hibs fans and just not wanting it to happen, but I think financially for them it can be massively beneficial. I think for both clubs it would be beneficial going forward, but as we say, it's all if buts and maybe at this point in time.
Okay, Ross, breathe a sigh of relief, mate. I'm coming to you as the Hearts fan here, and I'm going to given that Kenny plays for Leith anyway, he's nearly there, so I'm going to give him 5 minutes.
Steady.
I'm going to give him 5 minutes to get into character here and assume the position of a Hibs supporter. So Kenny, feel free, get the cogs whirring there so that you can
drenched in maroon.
think up your opinions there. Right, Ross, as a Hearts supporter, would there be an awkwardness of being the home team at Easter Road? Do you think it would inhibit the supporters?
Nah, because I mean, it may as well be a home ground for us considering our record against Hibs. You know
I knew this was going to go badly. I couldn't decide which fan to make you, because I knew either way you would just be at the wind-up the entire time.
And the fact that, you know, we have been there quite a lot for semi-finals, and I think it would create even more of a competition between the sets of fans, because as soon as Hibs fans know we're going to go there, and we'll be like, we'll sell out straight away. Do you think Hibs fans are going to go, well, you can sell out then? They'll probably try and sell out the game beforehand, and it might create, you know, we've got the same stadium now. They can't say, it's because your stadium's smaller, you've got a bigger crowd. That
is a fascinating argument that you bring up, that in theory could financially benefit both clubs for a season, and that there is that direct competition of, what was your attendance last week?
Exactly.
Alright, because we that is the kind of thing that Budge and Dempster, as shrewd businesswomen, could be looking at and thinking, well, how do we add an extra 2,000 to 3,000 onto the gate? Well, create a direct competition between both sets of fans.
Yeah, and obviously Easter Road does need an atmosphere every second week when we arrive, so, you know.
Right, okay. Have you got anything?
I set a dodgy precedent here, eh?
Thanks for that one, Sean.
You're welcome.
Me up. Hibs.net.
Easter Road's alright, you know, it's not Tynecastle, but at the end of the day, if it's the only option that we've got, we're going to take it, and it will create that extra competition.
Yeah, on that though, Hearts fans are incredibly attached to Tynecastle, sometimes even to the extent where logic goes out the window, you know, where there is a legitimate financial case put to people to say it's not feasible to stay here, or we need drastic change. There are still, you know, even when you put a hypothetical to someone in that situation, there are a lot of jambos who say doesn't matter. I'd rather the club stagnate, or I'd rather we hit a glass ceiling in terms of where we can perform in the league, but stay at our spiritual home. There was obviously the big panic around 10 years ago about the idea of uprooting the club and moving them to Murrayfield. I know it's going to be temporary at Easter Road, but that bond with the stadium and the surroundings would be lost moving to Easter Road. Do you think that would affect the fans' mentality? Do you think there's any chance that would bleed onto the park, that it would just be a strange kind of season?
I think you're asking the wrong person, because you've accused me as well of maybe looking at the bigger picture more often than, you know, that it's going to affect the players. I see it the same way as Anne probably does, and sees it as a business as well. And if I had my way, I think we'd be in a new stadium anyway, and we'd leave Tynecastle behind, and we'd obviously have to look for investors, but that's a different story. In terms of the actual players, no, I don't think it will affect them, because at the end of the day, we're going to, you know, sell that out, and it's going to be Hearts fans they're seeing at the end of the day more than anyone else. Whether we play in Hampden, whether we play at Easter Road, away grounds, whatever, we want to, you know, make our voices heard more than anyone else.
Going on a purely personal basis, from having been in and around the tunnels and the dugouts of both the changing rooms, both home and away, for both stadiums, I think the Hearts players wouldn't be bothered by the move to Easter Road, because we all see it like that stand in general has seen so many better days, and it's not just the outside of it as well. The inside really is more than just a licky paint and a bit of elbow grease that can do it up. It does just need to be redone.
I'm going to miss
the ground up,
though, to be honest, when it goes, like, really am. My season ticket's been in there a lot of the time, and you know, just the memories is from that stand that I've had.
Well, that was one thing I was going to bring up, is that idea of the stand itself. The discussion goes straight on to where we go, but that obviously is a landmark if Anne Budge, which she appears to, is now putting the wheels in motion to that stand will be replaced, you know, as soon as we possibly can, essentially, which is obviously different. We've always said before, at some point we know we're going to have to do it. Now it's the soonest point.
No 400 grand for that.
Well, that's the next conversation. But with that in mind, Ross, you've said you've got a lot of memories and stuff there. Do you accept, regardless of that stand simply needs to be replaced now, or is there still a question? Should we let it go as long as it possibly can before it needs to be replaced, or are we at that point anyway?
From a financial standpoint, I think we should leave it as long as we possibly can. I'm not going to listen to any idiots that go, oh, it's a death trap and all this rubbish. Like, you know what I mean? It's you can only listen to it for too long and not say anything. At the end of the day, it's a great stand with a great history. It generates most of the atmosphere, arguably, at Tynecastle. There's still life in it yet, no matter what anyone says. Yes, there are things we need to do to improve it, but the ongoing maintenance will have to be considered as well. At the end of the day, we're going to have to build a brand new stand, which is going to be a bigger factor more than anything to do with upkeep for the current stand. So as long as possible we can.
But then I know the big thing with the design of football stadiums nowadays is the ability to host corporate events and corporate hospitality at games, but also business events throughout the week and continue to spend money. And that is the big thing, that if Anne Budge feels that she can do that now and have an extra 3 or 4 years of that type of income coming into the club, rather than sitting with what we've got at the moment, which is very little, if any, of that income, then I suppose that's why that would be a reason to pull the trigger now and do it as soon as she can. Yeah, Sean, one last thing before we go to Kenny the Hibby.
I think with the state of play, how football is in general at this moment in time, how much money there is in the game as well, when we are looking to we know for a fact that Robbie's looking further afield, he's looking abroad for players to bring in. If we can realistically have state of the art facilities there for them, as opposed to what looks like your old grand's bathtub there for an ice bath after the game, that just looks so much better. Look at the huge clubs who have got that history with their stadiums, but they still needed to make the change. Anfield is the main one. They had to take out the boot room, the iconic thing for all the managers to go in, purely because the times were changing and they needed to adapt. As much as they wanted to keep it, there wasn't enough space. They needed to. That's still a fairly rustic vibe to it, but they've still got all the interview stations in there. They've got a press room. It just needs to be done at a certain point in time if you're going to be a state-of-the-art football club and look to be taken seriously on a European level. Okay,
this could be the shortest interview we've ever done in the history of Monday Night Football. Kenny, if you were in the position of a Hibs fan, would you entertain this for even a minute, or would you be very hacked off at the idea of your club allowing your biggest rivals to come and play?
My first port of call would be Leith Athletic and saying, listen, this team for on the road need to ground share the Leith Athletic Football Centre right next to Meadowbank, a nice 4G surface. Is there any chance you can accommodate Hearts there? Because where I've played football week in, week out, it is a fantastic arena, albeit it holds about 200 people. You never know. Nah, I wouldn't entertain it if I was a hubby. I'd no. If the shoe was on the other foot, I'd hate it. But at the end of the day, the only real implications are going to be for them is a wee bit more in the coffers, kind of thing. I don't think, pride aside, they've got much to lose from it. But certainly, if the shoe was on the other foot and I was a Jambo having to ground share with them, no, I wouldn't want to be doing that, to be honest with you. But
we're aware that it obviously would have a financial benefit. In order to sell it to the supporters, do you think that Leanne Dempster would have to be incredibly upfront about the exact specifications of that financial benefit? Do you think essentially that the Hibs board would have to go to the supporter and say, well, it's an extra £3 million next year?
Absolutely. But again, at the end of the day,
and that was just a figure plucked out of thin air.
Oh no,
anyone.
absolutely. Like Hearts in many ways, Hibs have kind of entered a new dawn off the park as well with Dempster coming in, and she's undoubtedly reshaping things. They're looking a bit better on the park. It's all about the supporters putting the trust in the people who make the decisions at Easter Road. Likewise, it is Hearts and Anne Budge and the foundation. It is going to be for me, if it's a decision that's going to have to be made, then it's going to be made in the best interest of Hibs. And if Leanne Dempster and whoever else think that it's in the best interest of Hibs and it's going to benefit them financially, or however it's going to benefit them in the long run, they're just going to have to swallow their pride, in my opinion. As much as I'd hate to be in their shoes, you're just going to have to put your trust in the bigwigs, really. As I said, by and large, apart from pride and watching us playing in their home stadium every second week, they're going to get a wee bit extra money for themselves. So, but I kind of sympathise with them a wee bit.
Okay, so from a Hearts perspective, everyone seems fairly comfortable with the idea. Think we would adjust it pretty quickly, and that logistically it just makes sense. From a Hibs perspective, just a very quick one-word answer from each of you. Do you think this will happen? Or, if, as long as the Hearts situation is sorted out, as long as the main stand actually is being redeveloped over the next couple of years, do you think Hibs will allow Hearts to play their home games at Easter Road for whatever length of time, Sean?
More than one word, no. And also, I don't think they'll want to share their halftime pizzas with us. So no. If Hibs do say no, or the talks fall down, would you expect Hearts then to play their games at Murrayfield? Most likely, just purely because it's happened previously. There's precedent already set for it there, and there's not really any other options in the surrounding area. Ross, Easter Road, yes or no?
Yes, because I think Anne Budge and Leanne Dempster are above all the kind of rubbish that us fans talk about with each other, and I think if the offer's there, it will be accepted.
Okay. Bombers. Kenny?
The Bombers, yeah.
Do I think it'll happen, or do I think Hibs will allow it to happen?
Do you think Hibs would allow it to happen if the situation comes up?
Yes, I think they would.
And do you think it will happen?
Yes, purely because if Hibs are agreeing to it, we have not really got any other alternatives bar a 67,000 seater rugby stadium.
We'll fill that as well. I've got like 400,000 fans probably.
Right, okay. So the next, this kind of leads on financially. Ross hinted that if we're looking at dedicating a lot of our finances towards redeveloping the main stand, there may have to be cutbacks in other areas. The Daily Record today would seem to very much fundamentally disagree with that idea, and they would essentially suggest that all of our money is going on to the playing budget. Now, there's been quite a violent reaction to this, and just the idea that it's completely farcical. But I'm not quite as sure that it's as farcical as people are making out, and there's a couple of precedents that we'll maybe talk about as we discuss. So, Sean.
Yes.
Niko Datkovic, a £400,000 transfer to assume the Croatian under-21 defender. Mm-hmm. How likely do you think it is that firstly he will be playing in maroon next season, and secondly, if he does, that it will be a fee anywhere near the region of £400,000 that would have changed hands?
Not in a million years is it going to be for £400,000. Let's look at it as the Daily Record who have came out with the story. If you also the Evening News ran the story, if you read their one, it said there'll be a nominal fee because Hearts aren't looking to pay much of a transfer, much like the Kenny Anderson deal was. There's a contract there, he's out on loan just now, they've been looking to get him in a shop window anyway. They realise he doesn't want to be there. They're looking for a wee bit of money because his contract's running down, and it's better than them losing him for free. 400,000 is purely just they've went, well, he's a Croatian international or under 21 international. We've got a photo of him with Harry Kane playing here. He's obviously worth a wee bit of money. That's purely what's happened. I think it's very possible. Certainly knowing the scouting network we've got set up at Tynecastle, there's definitely the possibility that we'll at least have talks with them. I'm not completely sure whether or not he'll be playing in maroon next year. If he's got half the pedigree that people have spoken about, I've not even seen a YouTube video of him as of yet, but I'm definitely be interested in having a look at him. Whether he's there, who knows at this point. It's, as we say, it's been in two papers this morning. We can only go so much on that. I don't get the purely just because I don't buy into the transfer fee for it. I don't get the violent reaction from people, because if we had that type of money, there wouldn't be any worrying about Zeefuik not coming back to us next season. I think if we had the money there, we'd be going with the tried and tested before we were going with a young player. We know how much Robbie Neilson wants Zeefuik to stay, and if there was technically funds there, he probably would be haggling with Groningen at this moment in time, as opposed to putting 400,000 in for another player.
Okay, well, that's another conversation that we'll come on to, because I'm not necessarily sure that I agree in any way with that statement when you're talking about a position that we have another 3 or 4 players in, and then another where we've just lost 2 of our kind of first choice 3 in that position. Probably let's just concentrate at the moment on the actual player himself. Ross, does Niko Dakovic look to you like he fits the profile of the players that we will be going after, taking for now the potentially fantasy £400,000 out of the equation?
If we didn't speak to Robbie Neilson when we did, then I'd be maybe questioning what type of player he is. He's taller than Danny Wilson. Apparently he's good with the ball at his feet as well. Croatian under 21, so you know he's technically going to be a player. So he's probably been brought up in the right way to play football, and this is exactly the type of player that we're after. And it goes back to the question of, you know, the Hearts mentality of playing at Easter Road. If we had to, Robbie Neilson has clearly said that he wants players who can cope with pressure even more than technical ability. And if we're going to be playing at a different stadium, then it's players like this we're going to try and bring in. The only thing that might crop up is if we're going to try and bring in talent from all over Europe, I'm a bit worried that we're bringing in too many young players. I think we need a better mix of more experienced players and younger players. Okay,
well, that is certainly something that we will move on to as this conversation develops. Kenny, I'll get your final points from you on the actual player himself, and then I'll let you start the conversation on the financial element of it, which you'll be delighted to hear. So, Niko Dakovic, is that the kind of profile of players that you think Hearts will realistically be looking at in this transfer window?
Yes, absolutely. Got Craig Levine, a director of football, ex-centre half, very good centre half at that. He fits the bill in terms of what we are looking for in relation to, well, he looks like he does, 'cause I've never seen him playing, so I can't really comment in that respect, but his pedigree would suggest he might have sell-on value in the future, which is obviously what we're all about. He does fit the bill in that respect. The fee that's being bandied about is just ridiculous, in my opinion. I think that if we were going to throw a wee bit more money at it, I think it would be in the form of slightly increased wages for a player as opposed to splashing out on a massive fee. But in relation to the player, yes, he absolutely fits the bill, and it would be something that if the deal was right, it's a player that would excite me to watch next season, I think.
Okay, let's talk about the money then, because that, I'm interested by what you bring up there about wages over transfer fees. And we're not money men in any sense. We are just normal fans, but like normal fans, we're about to speculate heavily over what football players earn and the money that changes hands between football clubs as part of negotiations. So the one kind of plain devil's advocate, the one precedent that I wanted to set in this conversation was Aberdeen and Kenny McLean. I think we all have a very violent reaction to the idea at the moment that any Scottish clubs out with the Old Firm, and even to a certain extent the Old Firm, spending money, we instantly think, nah, it'll never happen. Because we just predominantly, we all deal in free transfers and nominal fees. It's not a climate anymore where Scottish clubs can go out and spend actual money. However, Aberdeen did in January. They went and got Kenny McLean for what they thought was a steal at 400 grand, which probably in general terms was a steal at 400 grand. Their reasoning behind that was firstly that they were in the midst of a title challenge, or at least a big season. They needed to try and solidify their position there, and that was worth a wee bit of an outlay, but also that they were debt free and on a sound financial footing, and thus could do their maths and work out that they had that spare money. Hearts, whichever way you look at it, by hook or by crook, which I need to put in for the Hibs fans still listening at the moment, because they will be quick to point that out. Hearts are debt free. Hearts have, unlike most other clubs in this country, an additional resource stream in the shape of Foundation of Hearts. Now, at the moment, obviously, it's debatable exactly where that money is going and how much of that money is actually going into the footballing coffers, because we know most, if not all of it, is going to repaying Andet's initial loan to allow us to actually buy the club. But there is also the matter of increased season tickets, far more than we had accounted for in our initial budgets. There's also the matter of getting straight up to the SPL, which obviously we know that we had budgeted for 2 years in the Championship. Is there no question whatsoever who that money would then be spent on is a very different subject, as Sean's brought up already with the ideas AFIC. But is there no question whatsoever that Hearts could actually have 400 grand to spend on a special prospect if we were to be offered a deal that we thought this is simply too good to be true?
I think if you're asking me if the money's there for that to happen,
the money be there?
It probably could be. It probably could be. Whether they'll spend it on individuals at this stage, I don't think they will. I mean, we've just come off a topic of discussion about the revamp of the stadium. I mean, where's your priorities? I mean, do we prioritise trying to consolidate next year, in which case do we really need to be throwing that kind of money at individuals? I see exactly what you're saying. If they identify someone, could potentially be the guy Datkovic, we don't know, but if they identify someone and think, right, wait a minute, this guy could make us £2.5, £3 million in a couple of years' time, would they throw the money? They could, but I just don't think they will. Having listened to Nielsen over the last few weeks and whatever else, basically since the turn of the year, they're not really going to be throwing money at players in terms of fees. And Ambudge said it on the pitch after the final game of the season as well, that wasn't going to happen. I think the money may well be there, but I don't think they're going to channel it in that manner. I don't think they're going to be spending £200,000-400,000 on individuals. It might be something that might happen in a year or 2 years once we have consolidated, but for me, I'd be sceptical about it happening as well, to be honest with you.
I would say the main difference between this deal we're talking about and the Kenny McLean one as well, that you brought up there, is he's an under 21 for Croatian internationalist. According to the Daily Record, everyone and their dog's been scouting him at one point in time. He looks, on paper, everything looks good for it, but he's most likely, I'm presuming, won't speak fluent English at this point in time. He would be coming to an entirely new league, into a team that's pretty young already, completely untried at that level at this moment in time, whereas Kenny McLean was just an ad drop to another team in the same league, a better standard of player around him, but there was no language barrier, nothing like that is so risky with that type of transfer fee if it's from somewhere completely different country. As a whole new culture he would be coming into, whereas Kenny McLean pretty much knew what he was coming into, although Aberdeen accents can be tricky at times. But
okay, so your thought is that if there was an element of guarantee that you at least knew you were going to get an adequate player, but potentially a very, very good player, like in that situation, then you think that Hearts may actually be able to find this kind of money, but not on an untried commodity.
I don't know. The main thing is none of us know this unless you're involved in the boardroom. We can only speculate on that. I would say that's the main difference between it, is Aberdeen knew what they were getting. They could pretty much bank on what player they were getting and how he was going to perform at them, whereas it's completely untested. I think the reason we're getting such a big reaction now from the Hearts fans is because we've been burnt when we've spent transfer fees previously. No one wants a Mircea Bishlia again. No one wants a Gordon Petric. It's just
the thought of it.
combine those two transfer fees for what we actually got for the players. It's frightening.
I completely agree, and that's what we're going to lead on to now in terms of the topic about finances. Is that most clubs, I think, actually, if they saw that report, even if they suspected it was completely false in the Daily Record, most clubs would be kind of butterflies in the stomach territory. You know, that thing of, this is amazing, we've got this whole summer of speculation and the names we're going to get rumoured away, and there's real potential for us to upscale our squad here and really dramatically improve even on what has been a very successful squad. Whereas because we have had our fingers burnt with this speculate to accumulate kind of mentality, the Hearts reaction seems to be, oh no, yeah, we'll take these foreigners coming in, and we will, you know, guys like Ozturk will happy to take a gamble on them, but if they're a free transfer on moderate wages. We don't want to see this idea of 300, 400, 500,000 pounds, but in 2 years' time he'll be a £5 million player. Well, what if he breaks his leg in 3 weeks? What if he's just a bit mental, like Mauricio Pinilla? What if he's a guaranteed superstar, as we've seen with Pinilla now, but you just couldn't keep him at the casinos in Edinburgh? He was just completely bored. You know, there are all of these different elements. Do those worry you, Ross? Or because we're a more sane club on a more solid footing, should we as Hearts fans actually be looking at this as a completely new dawn and not using any of those old examples?
Well, and we've got to remember as well that we're only talking about this because a really terrible newspaper quoted a figure. So if we're saying 400k,
that is the opinion of Ross Nichol and not necessarily the opinion of Monday Night Football or Radio Celtic.
Okay, we'll pretend it isn't then. But if it was 400k we're playing for a player, relatively, we've got to understand that there's going to be massive flaws in this game that we're going to hopefully try and sort out, just like we've done with Ozturk. Relatively, for us, that's maybe a gamble we can't afford to proceed with at this moment in time. Maybe, as we said, a couple of years down the line, or after the stadium's done and we're starting to see a bit of income increase. But at this moment in time, we can't afford to have that gamble, simply because the type of player we're getting for the relatively big amount of money that we're going to be spending, it's just not, the balance isn't there yet.
From a slightly different perspective though, you mentioned how there would be this sort of eager anticipation for other clubs if this kind of money was being potentially spent on a signing. If Craig Levine and Robbie Nielsen and whoever else, John Murray, whoever it may be, have put their heads together and went, listen, we actually think this guy could be worth 400k, I would be extremely excited if they felt the guy was, because they've got my full trust. They've pretty much every signing they've made thus far has contributed in some way, shape or form. I trust the scouting network. If they felt it was worth the risk, I'd be fully behind it, but I just don't think that it's even on the table.
Staying on that hypothetical theme though, would they have some persuading to do of the Hearts supporter? Even though the majority of us do fully trust the scouting situation, this wouldn't be purely a test of their ability to scout. It would also be a test of their willingness to spend the funds, or their ability to learn from the mistakes of the club prior to their actual arrival back. Sean, would you as a Hearts supporter need to be convinced not just that this player is worth £400,000, but that is the actual best possible business plan for Hearts to be utilising going forward?
I wouldn't say necessarily myself I would need to be persuaded. I think Joe Public and your average fan definitely would. I think just purely because Hearts have been founded. Look at all the important players we've had over the last 10-15 years. We've been a wheeler dealer club in who we've got in. You look at all the big teams that have done stuff, the 98 team, the 2006, it's always been free transfers we've got in. They've been higher wages, but because there's not that big transfer fee looming overhead, there's not that expectation that comes with it. I think as soon as we bring in a player for 400 grand, automatically, as stupid as it seems, because they should be your new hero, because you should be hoping that they're going to be the best player, it automatically somehow creates a bullseye on your back. Look at it with Mario and Fellaini last year at Man United. Now, I'm not saying by any means he was the right purchase for them to make at that point in time, but is because he got slaughtered because he spent so much money on him, his performances suffered so much. This season, a bit less pressure on him, he's actually doing a decent job. He's doing a lot more than their fans expected him to do for them. So it's just breaking down that precedent. If it was going to happen, it's breaking down people just breaking away from the norm and realising, like, this is an investment opportunity. That's basically what we're looking at. We're bringing in a player who's not only going to do a job for us for a couple of years, this is basically our savings bond. If everything goes well with us, we are getting 5 times the money in 3 years that we've put into it, and we're getting a really good player on the way there. But I think it's just that problem. It's a habit that's been built up by fans, and it's not just Hearts, it's loads of teams. If they were spending that money, there's always that worry with it. So
Sean raises a pertinent point there, I think, in terms of the transfer fee, that Hearts fans generally, I think we probably do have quite high expectations of any signing that comes into the club, but in general terms, you're able to let players settle in a wee bit, allow them a few mistakes. We've seen it. Ozturk did have a wee bit of a shaky period at the start, and now most fans would quite readily accept that he's one of our best players. Equally, you can argue that although at times it's maybe not seemed that way, we have actually been relatively patient with Sofiane El Hasnaoui, and in the game against Rangers we're starting to see that patience does look like it could pay off. Sean's point can be extrapolated out to all of the transfer business that we're going to see this summer, I think, in that it doesn't necessarily have to be that they come in as a result of a £400,000 transfer, but just that they come in on top of what has been an incredibly successful season. There is going to be an additional wee bit of scepticism and an additional question mark next to everyone's name in terms of going then prove that you're better than we had last season. For example, the left back position. No one, I don't think really, from a Hearts supporter perspective, was happy to see Adam Eckersley let go. Everyone realised that he knocked his pan in, he did a phenomenal job at what he was asked to do, and in general terms he is a player who could perform at SPL level. We've seen certainly worse left backs play for Hearts and cope ably at that level, but Robbie obviously thinks he can get a player slightly above that level. Do you guys envisage there being a problem for new signings coming in where instantly they're going to be viewed through the prism of who did their job last season, and because of the step up in level, because they're likely to be foreigners coming into new surroundings, that for the first 5 or 6 games may not actually be a favourable comparison? Do you have any concerns about that, Kenny?
Absolutely. I mean, every individual player, regardless of what the supporters and what the club are going to do in terms of giving you time to bed in, every individual player is different. They will take time to settle in, whether it's a language barrier, they change a culture, whatever it may be. I think they will. I mean, I think, you could find out the first couple of games, he's not been great, but, Robbie and Craig have seen enough of him to sign him, so he'll be the real deal kind of thing. 5-6 games in, he's still not producing. Hearts maybe on the end of a couple of bad results. You then might start to get question marks raised that wee bit quicker. Then again, you could hit the ground running like Gennaro Zifook has this year, and it's the complete opposite end of the scale. At the end of the day, the remit at the start of the season from Nielsen's point of view was to assemble a team that was going to get us out of the Championship. He did that successfully. Now his remit is, well, what he's saying publicly is the top 6. Whether they're even higher than that behind closed doors, we don't know, but that's the remit now, is to assemble a squad that is going to achieve top 6 football. Now, in relation to the patience from the stands, I mean, there's been times this year where it's been less than patient from when I've been there, and it's been like that for years. You're still getting the same old shouts at times, but I do think that there is a little bit of give now with the Hearts support, and I personally think that the majority of the signings will be foreign imports. I think they've readily sort of publicised they're going to places like Greece and Italy and Croatia perhaps, or wherever it may be, to source players, and every individual player is going to take time to settle in. Kenny Anderson, for one, seems to be taking a wee bit of time to settle in, but they've seen fit to pay that nominal fee for him. So I think in the long run, we will. It's all about the trust in the management, and I've quite clearly got it for what I'm saying. I see where you're coming from, but ultimately I think results on the park will determine how much time they get.
Ross, when we sat down with Robbie Neilson, I likened him to a boy band manager, and not just in his dress sense, but in the manner that he may well have a blueprint of exactly what he's looking for in terms of characters in the dressing room and types on the park, to get that winning formula, that formula that sells. Touching on the season review as well as the preview of next season, is there a particular blueprint that has worked for us? Is there an example that you hold up above all others, or maybe even a couple in slightly different scenarios, that when Robbie goes shopping this summer you think he will refer back to, and that, well, that worked with him, or that type of player, when we brought them in it worked because here's the example? Are there a couple that you hold above others that you think Robbie will likely try and replicate with similar types of players this summer?
Well, maybe not in terms of individual players that I can speak of, the type of individual players, but Robbie Neilson was involved in a team that had a spine through it. Craig Gordon, Stephen Presley, Paul Hartley, and that worked. And then they had your foreigners around you who took to the club, and we had the players there to tell them what it meant to play for Hearts. You also had a few experienced players like your Fisas, and I know we're never going to see a player like Fisas for a long time at Hearts, but a guy like that, maybe not as good, like maybe a kind of wily veteran that's been around the block, who can take a responsibility for and teach young players how to play at this level and sort of things like that. So Robbie Neilson has been involved as a player in those kind of teams, so I think that he might look back to those teams that he has played in and then move accordingly, and that's why he's trying to look abroad and get more foreign players in, because the youngsters that we're bringing through just now are mainly Scottish. Yes, we've got Ali Mosturk's only 22 or just on 23, so we do have a few foreign players that are young, but I can see what he's trying to do. Okay, Sean, essentially the same question to you. Are there specific examples you think that have succeeded in particular this season, or have surpassed their expectations more so than other signings, that you think Robbie's likely to try and go back to that well again?
I think he's definitely going to. Well, he confirmed it to you. He definitely has got ideas in mind for players for specific positions that he would want to get. I think it wasn't lucky last season, but I think he'd done everything he could with what he had to play with. I think the opportunities for bringing in the exact players he wants to fit that mould will be a lot more this season, purely just because we're a lot more attractive a proposition for players coming in. I think that gives him a lot more impetus in the transfer market to bring in exactly who he wants and have specific positions looked out. I think it's I don't know how much he'll necessarily want to change it up. I think especially with the young players, he's got a lot of diversity there. He's got a couple of players who can play a couple of different positions, which give him opportunities. I don't know, they've said already, he said already he's looking for youth players, but if there's an older player who he thinks he can definitely do a job and is massively value for money, of course they'll get brought in. Going on the experience point that we touched on earlier, we need to remember not only like the players we've brought in, the foreigners, they've had a champion winning season under the belt, but also the younger players who have been in for the past 2 or 3 seasons now have actually 2 or 3 seasons under their belt. They're not by any means experienced veterans by this point in time, but they're no wee laddies who are still worrying about what's going to happen, am I going to be in the squad this week. They know the score by this point in time, so they know what they're doing. So I think that gives Robbie a lot more free rein as well with there will definitely be some of the younger players who are already voices in the dressing room and can lead by example to the other ones coming through. So there's a lot less worry about the bringing in those more experienced leaders. I think we're breeding them from within.
Okay, final few questions as we try to round up this. Like I say, I want to touch a wee bit more on the review before we finish on a few notes on the preview. In terms of transfers from each of you, who's your signing of the season? So not player of the season, because Jamie Walker seemed to have swept up most of those. Kenny, who was your signing of the season? Head and hands doesn't really come across on radio, pal.
See, because of all by and large performed so well, it's difficult to pick one out.
That's
for the
why
first,
I asked the
yes. For the first half of the season, for me, Gomez was a stick out, tailed off. I'm a big fan of Boabin, and I think we've missed him in the closing stages of the season. I think he's different. I think he was capable of taking the team 20-30 yards up the park. I think we've missed that. For me, I will go with our midfield comparison and saying Miguel Pallardo. I think he's a complete standout. I think it was opportunistic. I don't think they were looking for him, but I think he became available and they thought, nah, this guy's the real deal. And I'm very, very keen to see him signed up for next season and hopefully beyond that as well. So I'd say Pallardo definitely 100%.
So you've gone with Pallardo on the basis that you believe technically he is our best player.
I think he
and
is.
Thus constitutes the best deal.
I think he seems to have a wee bit of everything. Don't get me wrong, we all had a bit of an off day at Easter Road. We got turned over 2-0. It was potentially the worst I'd seen him, but the derby's a completely different kettle of fish, and once you've got a couple under your belt, I think someone like him certainly will be fine. But in terms of natural talent, he doesn't seem to break sweat. I mean, his ball retention is something else. I remember at Wraith Rovers away when we won, was it 3-1? He was magnificent that night. He was absolutely magnificent. Everything seemed to go through him. They always seem to look for him when they're in danger, and he'll take the ball under pressure, which is for me something that Scottish players don't do enough. They don't take the ball under pressure. He does, and that's obviously the Spanish influence on him, but I just think he's been a stick out.
Okay, I was loath to do a kind of end of season awards type show, quite simply because they're absolutely done to death at this moment in the season, and there's just no need for another one. But I do think this is a specifically interesting question, and it's funny to see that Kenny's gone with essentially the best player, as in, well, he has to be the best deal because we've got him for nothing and he's coming in, he's now technically our best player. It's going to be telling to see whether Ross and Sean go with the same thinking. I don't think they will. Who wants to go first with their signing of the season?
Ladies first, Ross.
Alright, well, fair enough. I'll say Alexander, simply because he's doing a dual role. He's exactly the type of goalkeeper that we needed at the time. I was gutted, as well as everyone, that we didn't keep McDonald, but I think we improved on McDonald by getting Alexander in. I think he's going to be sticking about the club for a long time after his career's done. And not only that, we've got two really young goalkeepers coming through, and who better to have between the sticks than Alexander. Not only does he seem the type of player who knows exactly what he's doing, he marshals the defence as well, as we've pointed out throughout the season. He can also coach these guys into hopefully becoming the players that we want them to be. So for value for money as well, I don't think we're paying him that much, even though he is a dual role. And again, yeah, I think the payback from it we're going to see not only through players in the future, but through his performances this season and hopefully next season. I've got to say Alexander.
Okay, I have to say I did not expect. Did anyone expect Neil Alexander to come up in this conversation?
Yes.
Goalkeepers union.
Okay, I'm assuming that doesn't mean that he's also yours though, Sean.
No. I totally see Ross's point, and also just the fact that we've seen the other two keepers play at the back this season. The back four or back three, when it's rarely played, just looks so much more assured with Alexander behind them, because not only is there someone constantly talking, but they know they're talking sense as well. they're never going to get a shout of someone who. You see Scott Gallagher, he puts the fear in me when he's got the ball at his feet. It's like when you see Oxley coming for a cross, you think you didn't quite know what you're doing here. Whereas Neil Alexander, you imagine him being on the training park and being able to stroke the ball about and know exactly what he's doing with it. So I think that definitely reassures the players who are playing in front of him, because they know he's got a footballing brain.
Okay, let's get on to yours though.
Yep. I'm going purely just because of the impact they've had. Also, I think you can guess it already, the fact that the period they came in, we were massively short in that area.
I can guess it now.
Yep. They got us through a sticky period, and also when we got other players coming back in, they enabled us to completely change the way we were playing if we wanted to. Try players in different positions and just gave us a completely different outlet we never had before. And I'm going for Gennaro Zeefuik. Purely just the goal scoring record speaks for itself. The fact that we've got him on a pretty amazing deal when we're paying him a pittance, from what I've heard. The fact if we don't get him back next season, if it doesn't happen, that was an absolute steal getting him in for the period of time we did for what little money we did. Without
indulging in too much backslappery for Robbie Neilson,
yep,
and his transfer strategy, and Craig Levine as well, it has to be said, that conversation probably could have involved about 5 or 6 different names. I mean, it pretty much did. And it Gomez, Payardo, Buabin, Alexander, Zeefuik. That's not to mention So, who could be argued as our best player also, yep. And Ali Mosturk, who we all agree will grow in to be a potentially fantastic defender. So without kind of overplaying it has been an incredibly successful summer. It remains to be seen how those players translate to the level above, because they were brought in with a very specific task this summer and they achieved it they passed that test with flying colours. It's a very different test that they're now going to face. I'm going to ask generally how we think we'll get on, given that this is sort of tying a bow around the Heart stuff for the next 2 or 3 weeks at least. But before we go on to that, I want to ask about the transfers this summer. Is it possible that we encounter such a strike rate again, Kenny? Is there any chance that we will be sitting this time next season and saying there's not really a signing that you could argue was a bad one? Are we much more likely to revert to, without being harsh or disparaging in any way, a kind of Jim Jeffries type hit rate, which was one good, one bad generally? And when they were good, they were very good, but when they were bad, they were equally bad. They were equally bad at times. That tends to be more like a kind of SPL strike rate on transfers. Is it feasible that Robbie Neilson continues to buck that trend for another season?
Yes, I think it's feasible. You can't say it's not feasible judging on what's just happened in terms of the signings that have come in. I don't think they've really got one wrong. I don't think you can really argue with that. I think even although the jury might still be out with the likes of El Hassanoui and Anderson, both have chipped in with critical goals. Livingston for Anderson, and I think El Hassanoui got a couple. The one against Falkirk, he scored a beauty at home against Livingston as well. Absolutely, it's feasible. You can't say it's not, because they've not had a failure yet, in my opinion. It's a massive ask, but for me it's possible, absolutely. And the amount of research that they seem to be doing, and the contacts that they have, and the experience certainly that the likes of Levine has, not that Levine's got it bang on every single time as well in the past, but I think it's feasible. It's a big ask, but it's feasible.
Sean?
I would agree with that. The only signing that I would say isn't a success, but purely hasn't needed to be, is Scott Gallagher, purely because he's providing backup. I don't think he's of the standard that he could play SPL football or SPFL football. I don't think he's got in him, but as long as Neil Alexander's fit, he never will have to. So I definitely think they'll keep the strike, or there's definitely a chance of them keeping the strike rate up with knocking it out the park with the sign-ins. And until they sign a dud, then they're like, they need to prove me wrong, or let's hope they don't. But definitely knowing the transfer networks and stuff or the scouting networks they've got up, how far their arms are reaching, there's no half thought in this. Every player they're fully invested in, they've done their homework, they know as much as they can before getting them in of what they're actually getting. So no, I've got every faith in them that they're going to keep up the strike record. I'm not saying we're going to sign a team that's going to win us the league, but it's definitely going to be a progression.
Okay, it's a very optimistic studio still, which is good, but it also does set the bar incredibly high for Robbie Neilson and his team, and Craig Levein and Anne Budge. Obviously, from a Monday Night Football perspective, we hope that they can live up to that, because it makes the show a lot more enjoyable when we're coming in here on a Monday and talking about wins for both clubs. That would be nice wherever Hibs find themselves next season, if they can also have a similarly successful campaign. I do think it's going to be a bigger task this year, which sounds redundant because obviously it's a higher level, but
where's the fun and pessimism though?
No, I know. Everyone should be aboard the happy train at all times for me, unless there is a specific reason not to be. But I do think, as you know, the money exponentially increases with the level, so in theory it should become a similar type challenge. But I do think the money doesn't quite increase as much as the challenge does. It's a much more competitive league, the SPL. But I do think there is, just as we round up, it was interesting to hear Tommy Wright speak tonight, and it brought to mind something that we've discussed a lot on both this show and on the Stramash, which you'll also find on MondayNightFootball.com, where we discuss bigger issues in Scottish football. And we've spoken a lot about league reconstruction and the idea that this season has proven there are at least 16, if not 18 teams big enough to compete in a Premier League in this country. But Tommy Wright was discussing on Sportsound tonight the idea that he doesn't feel St Johnstone get enough credit for what they've achieved, and the fact that they are now 4 years in a row they've finished in the top six. And he went on to say, you know, there are a lot of bigger clubs who haven't managed that. And now, depending which size you pitch St Johnstone at, I'm not necessarily sure that I hugely agree with that question, that answer, other than Hearts and Hibs, really. Because, and obviously Rangers, who have been completely removed from it. Because when you actually look at that, the SPL, as strong a league as it is, because the teams are all of relative calibre and they can all take points off each other, when you actually look at the size of the clubs in there, Hearts and Hibs, if they do get promoted, should be going in there and saying, well, we're top four clubs, unquestionably, especially if Rangers aren't there. Top four clubs. Now, we know that's not necessarily how it works on the park, but in terms of ambitions for next season, Kenny, you mentioned already Robbie said top six, and Budge came out after we won the championship and said top four. Now, by that logic, they'll have us champions by the end of July. Where do you see Hearts and Hibs? I think we can include Hibs in this conversation as well. Where do you see us realistically placing next season, and where do you think should be the aim, on the basis of, well, this is our right to expect to be here in the league of the actual clubs that are there? Taking out this idea of the SPL being a step up, actually, you know, looking at the clubs themselves, where would you expect Hearts to put themselves?
For me, I think Robbie's initial assessment was a realistic one in terms of the top six. Would I take a top six finish right now on the back of the season we've just had? You'd probably say no, because we've surpassed expectations so much this season. But I think keeping my feet on the ground, which I haven't necessarily done throughout tonight's show, I'd settle for a top 6 finish. And I can relate. I know what Tommy Wright's saying. I mean, they've won a major trophy and played European football under Tommy Wright. They've made massive strides, because they were very much a yo-yo club as well. They were up, they were down. Your Giorgio Boyles and your Darren Dodds of this world, they were up and they were down, but they are now probably recognised as an established SPFL club, which for them is a massive thing. Hearts dropped out of that, so I don't think, and Hibs dropped out of that, I don't think we have a divine right to go in there and go, right, step aside, we're back, we're challenging for Europe. I think we've got to go and prove ourselves again, and we've got to re-establish ourselves. Absolutely.
I see exactly where you're coming from, and I fully subscribe to that theory. However, my other thing is playing devil's advocate in that situation, and I kind of equally believe both sides of it. There is the thing also of not needlessly carrying an inferiority complex, going back up thinking because we've spent one season in the Championship, these are Championship players and we're a Championship club and we've got to adjust to being in the SPL again. That's not the case. None of the clubs involved in the playoffs out with Queen of the South are Championship clubs in any way. Most of the players, you could argue, aren't really Championship players. They just happen to have played there for a year because the circumstances have dictated that. So with that in mind, I do just think when we're saying about the positivity, you look at that league and you think, yes, that these are SPL players, but equally, if you were to go through, and obviously there is the rose-tinted view of your own players, but if you were to go through most teams in the SPL as well, I don't think either Hearts or Hibs would be taking more than 2 or 3 players from each team. I don't think there's many teams that you would look at, out with Aberdeen and Celtic, I don't think there's many teams you would look at and you say, I'd have 8 of their players ahead of the guys that are in our team. So with that in mind, should we actually be being more ambitious, Sean? And you don't want it to then turn into negativity if the team don't set the header alight right from the word go. But should everyone involved in both clubs be going into the next season, if it happens to be in the SPL, saying, well, third is feasible and then we'll see what happens from there?
In the words of S Club 7, reach for the stars. I didn't see why you would go, right, well, if we get 5th, that's alright. If we get 6th, that's alright. That should be the minimum. It should be, right, let's get as high as we possibly can. I think we've seen it with teams like Liverpool and stuff this season. The weight of expectation, because they never expected to be challenging for the league the other season, and that's when it came. And then when you're expected to follow up on that, when there's that level of expectancy there, that's when it weighs on you massively. It should just be, let's go out, let's play it week by week like we have this season, let's see where that takes us. It shouldn't necessarily be setting the goal of we should definitely be 3rd or top 6. Definitely we shouldn't be finishing any lower than 6th, I would say, but it shouldn't be a case of even worrying about that. It should be purely, let's go out, let's do what we do, and let's get the points on the board. Where we come at the end of the season, and unless there's a crisis point, where we end up at the end of the season is completely down to ourselves. But let's just go out and do ourselves proud, which is kind of the stance we've taken this season, and look what it's done for us.
Ross, are the targets for this season more up in the air, more changeable than any other? Sorry, I should say next season technically. More up in the air, more changeable than any other season we've ever encountered as Hearts fans, because of the vast transition that we're going to encounter over the summer, going back up and essentially not really knowing where the yardstick sits, because we've not even played an SPL team other than Celtic this season, so we've not been able to gauge this team yet.
I would say so. I mean, you get that from speaking to different types of Hearts fans, the older generation, like my dad and stuff like that. You'll get different answers from different sets of people. So going from that, the management may have their own target that they might be telling us something different from what they actually have. And you've got the fans' target, who we're probably going to be speaking about trying to finish higher than maybe the what the team think they're going to be. For me personally, I think we should be aiming for just European qualification. I know I just said just European qualification, but I remember seeing it as an absolute disaster if we finished behind teams like St Johnstone, Kilmarnock,
Livingston.
I seen that as an absolute disaster, even though we might have finished a wee bit higher up the table than the actual team at the time maybe should have been. So next season it's completely different in that we're coming back into the fold with a brand new outlook. I think it's going to be a successful season for us, but I think it's going to be because of what Sean said, that we should just go out there and try and enjoy that we're back in the Premier League, and if we do that, we'll hopefully finish up higher than the league than maybe if we had a bit of pressure on it.
Okay, before we go, we're going to do a predicting exercise. I know there is so many things that can change over the summer, but don't worry, I will give you another opportunity as the summer draws to a close to do this exact same exercise again. But the reason that I want to do it now is I think it will then give us a clear indicator of how we actually feel about the business that we do over the summer, because we can then see how everyone's expectations and predictions for the season change. So we can, we might look at the transfers individually and say, well, that's an alright bit of business, and then we get to the end, and if everyone's predictions for where we'll finish are 3 places lower, it would suggest actually maybe the transfer business hasn't been as good, or we've been left behind by our rivals because they've maybe done more. So that's why I think it's an interesting exercise. So Ross, what I want is what you would be satisfied with in terms of a league placing next season, and then I want where you expect us to finish, based on, not with the current squad or anything, on the basis of the business that you expect us to do over the summer, off of what Robbie said and everything like that. I want an expectation for where we'll finish and a setting of where you would be happy for us to finish. So firstly, where would you be comfortable with Hearts finishing? Where would you be satisfied with? Fourth. Where do you think Hearts will finish?
Fourth.
Okay, Sean, give me the same 2 questions. So where would you be satisfied with Hearts finishing next season?
Satisfied would be 4th also.
Okay, these are quite high currently, so this will be interesting. Where do you think Hearts will finish?
I don't know, the pessimist in me has kicked in.
Give me a number and then we can see how it changes.
6.5. I genuinely can.
Bottom of the top 6.
I didn't think it would be bottom of the top 6, but I don't know.
Okay,
we saw how much it hinged on early results this season. I think it'll be massively the same next season. So
for now, we're 4th is what you would be satisfied with, but you think you'll be disappointed because we'll finish 6th at this moment in time.
My heart says 4th, my head says 6th.
Okay, Kenny,
what was the first question?
where will you be satisfied with Hearts finishing next season?
First.
Any kind of top 6 finish for me.
So 6th you would be happy with?
Yes.
Where at this moment in time, based on what you think Hearts will do over the summer, where do you think Hearts will finish?
I think we will finish 5th.
Okay, all in the same kind of region, slightly different. Some guys have got higher expectations, as we'll see.
Aye, Sam. Under the microscope.
I'm going to try as much as possible and keep everything in perspective. Realise that it's still a young team. It's going to be difficult simply to readjust to that idea that there are no easy games. We've heard it loads this season, but it simply just wasn't the case in the Championship. There were games that were easy. There were games where you could comfortably rotate the squad and still know we'll have enough to get through it. That's not going to be the case. You can get a bloody nose against teams like Hamilton and not St Mirren, but Hamilton and Motherwell if they stay up, or whichever team comes up with us, and those teams can surprise you on a game by game basis. So I do think it'll be a real challenge. I think it'll be a test of the mentality of every player to see whether they can go for 38 games non-stop. The unbeaten run was a good preparation for that, but I'm not sure. So I like Kenny, I would be happy with the top half because I'm trying to be realistic. I think it would challenge me at times because I do think you have to change your own mentality in that. But like what I was saying with Tommy, right, you look at a top half finish and you think, well, in general that would be fine, but then you realise if we finish 6th, there is likely to be a St Johnstone, maybe a Hamilton, someone like that ahead of you, at which point you look at the league table and you say we should be be at least one place higher. So saying 6th in theory sounds fine, but when it plays out, it's a lot more challenging. But so I'm going to say 6th at the moment. I think we'll finish higher than that, and I think if Hibs come up, they'll not be too far behind us either, because I think there's a lot of teams in the SPL in turmoil at the moment. I think Dundee United, you're seeing it play out over the last 3 or 4 months. They're searching for the next generation to take over from Armstrong and Mackay-Steven. Can he quite find them?
It also looks like quite a few of their players are going to be cherry picked over the summer as well.
Very possibly. John
the best ones.
The next one, yeah.
Kifke.
Aberdeen, I think, are strong and safe in that second position, but I don't think they'll be as dominant in second next season. I think St Johnstone will suffer as well, simply because they'll lose another couple of players. So I think in actual fact it'll be a much tighter league than some people are expecting, and I think as a result Hearts could end up 3rd or 4th. So I'll say 4th for the time being, but I'm trying to convince myself that I'd be satisfied with top 6. So on that, we're going to leave it. Stay engaged with us throughout the week. MondayNightFootball.com, and that's Fitba. All the times I refer to it, Fitba. Fitba. That was, you sounded like Ryan McGowan there, Sean. Okay, so MN Fitball, at MN Fitball on Twitter, MondayNightFootball.com, Monday Night Football in the search bar on Facebook. We are always active on all of these places. The blog in particular is worth checking out. It's now very active on MondayNightFootball.com. You will find new content there constantly, and all our archived shows are there. So if you want to go back and listen to any of the interviews, any of the previous shows we've done, if you want to hear what we had to say last September about these new signings and how they were going to get on and how the unbeaten run was, how long it was going to last and all that kind of thing, and reminisce about the season just past, then get on there. They're all archived for you. So all that remains to be said is thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for joining me, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for a night of football, a night of music on Radio Saltaire. Cheers, guys.